Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're heading up, way up, into the rarefied air of the Himalayas. We're going to be exploring the hard economics of, well, a very unique kind of tourism asset. The high-altitude lodges in places like Nepal's Everest or Annapurna regions. And just to be clear, we aren't here for the romance of the trail. This is all about business strategy. And the analysis reveals this really brutal paradox at the heart of the sector. You have these premier lodges, right? Millions invested. And for 2 glorious months, let's say October, November, they see what the sources call a torrent of revenue.
Oh, absolutely. They're full, humming with activity. It feels like the investment is paying off.
But then, almost overnight, the bookings they vanish.
That's right. The asset flips. It goes from a profit center to a massive financial liability and with just breathtaking speed.
So by January, that lodge you were so proud of.
It's an expensive ghost structure. And it's actively bleeding cash. You still got security, some basic maintenance, and the big one, interest payments on your loans. Fixed costs don't care about the snow.
So the thing that your pride and joy in the autumn becomes your single biggest financial drag for, what, 8 months of the year?
Exactly. And historically, the accepted wisdom was just to blame the weather. It's the snow. It's seasonality. Nothing you can do but wait it out.
But that's a flawed argument, isn't it?
It's a fatally flawed argument, according to the source material. If you blame the snow, you're just accepting failure.
So the problem isn't really environmental, it's a failure of imagination.
Precisely. It's a failure of design and a failure of strategy. And so the whole mission for our deep dive today is to figure out how the future market leaders can turn that seasonal liability into a high-margin, year-round asset.
Through something that the sources call 4-season architecture.
Exactly. We're looking for the blueprint to master that silent season.
Okay, let's unpack that. Let's start with the money, with the core business issue. Why is this model so fragile, even when those 2 peak months are so good?
Well, it all starts with the initial investment, the CapEx, or capital expenditure.
The cost to build the thing.
And it is just astronomical. I mean, you have to remember where these places are. Remote, roadless regions, every single pane of glass, every bag of cement.
Has to be hauled in by helicopter.
By helicopter or mule train in some cases. The logistical nightmare means your construction costs are they're exponentially higher than almost anywhere else.
So you're looking at an investment level that could be similar to, say, luxury real estate in a major city.
Dollar for dollar, yes. But without any of the stability of an urban market. And that huge upfront cost brings us to the real financial killer here, the asset utilization rate.
Right. Let's focus on that. How does the calculation of time become such a disaster in this sector?
It all comes down to return on invested capital, or ROIC. It's basically how much money you make back compared to what you risked building the asset.
Okay.
Now, a big hotel in, say, Bangkok calculates its potential revenue over 365 days a year. So that initial cost gets divided by a huge number of potential booking days.
A big denominator.
A very big denominator. But a mountain lodge operator, they're forced to base their entire annual financial plan on maybe 60 or 70 reliable operational days. Their denominator is tiny.
And that's catastrophic for the number.
It's a catastrophic level of low utilization. It's the reason the money they make in that November rush has to be stretched so incredibly thin.
And that pressure, that compressed payback period, that's what leads to this phrase the source used that I found fascinating. The nightly rates are simultaneously exorbitant and insufficient.
It's the perfect description. It's the tyranny of the peak season balance sheet laid bare.
The price feels exorbitant to the traveler.
Of course. It is high by global standards.
Yeah.
But from the owner's perspective, that rate is, well, it's insufficient. It has to be high enough to service debt, cover the huge operational costs of those 2 months, and absorb the carrying costs of that exact same room sitting completely empty for 6 months of deep winter.
Which I imagine forces a very short-term mindset. You can't reinvest.
Yeah. You can't. When your business is just a desperate 2-month sprint, you can't afford to invest in things like high-quality staff training or expensive insulation upgrades. The whole financial structure actively discourages the kind of long-term reinvestment you need to be globally competitive.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is. The low asset utilization just kills your ability to retain capital.
Okay, so if the financials are that stretched, the analysis argues this problem is actually rooted in the physical design, in the buildings themselves. How did the sector end up with assets that are so mismatched to the economic reality?
The problem isn't abstract at all. You can see it in the stone and glass. The current architecture is almost across the board, optimized for one single, very narrow use case.
Which is basic shelter for an exhausted trekker.
Exactly. The assumption in the design is that the guest's main experience is outside, on the trail. The lodge is just a container, a glorified hostel, really.
But the moment you hit January, that whole equation flips.
It flips 180 degrees. If the trail is closed by snow, the lodge must become the destination. And that is the moment the current assets fail what we could call the winter test. And they fail spectacularly.
So let's get into the specifics of that. What are the actual architectural components that are costing owners so much?
You can start with insulation and glazing. Most of these lodges have very poor insulation, which means heating costs are prohibitive. You literally cannot afford to keep the building at a comfortable temperature for 6 months straight.
So you just don't.
You don't, and you can't sell that experience. Then look at the windows. They're almost all single-pane glass.
Cheaper to transport and install, I assume.
Much cheaper, but functionally a disaster. In a blizzard, that window doesn't frame the magnificent landscape as a feature. It presents it as a cold, terrifying threat that is actively sucking the heat out of your room.
The environment becomes hostile, not inviting.
It pushes the guest to just retreat under a blanket, not to engage with this incredible environment they're in.
Yeah.
And the common areas reflect that.
They're just functional. A place to eat and then go to bed.
Right. They become these desolate, cavernous spaces that lack any genuine warmth. Where's the library? Where is the dedicated area for contemplation? And crucially, there is almost never a strategic focus on a fireplace as a central gathering point.
So if you contrast that with a mountain asset that does master the winter, like a Swiss chalet or a Scandinavian cabin.
Oh, it's night and day. Those assets are explicitly designed for guests to spend entire days indoors and to be highly profitable while they're doing it.
Wow.
They use things like ESIP structural insulated panels. These are highly efficient, prefabricated modules that maximize thermal performance and cut down heating costs. And they feature massive double-glazed or even triple-glazed windows.
So the snowscape becomes part of the appeal.
It becomes a beautiful, framed, safe experience. And the fireplace is always the social and emotional heart of the building. It's the focal point for the entire winter experience.
So these aren't just aesthetic choices. They're strategic business decisions.
Absolutely. They are selling the asset itself as the destination. The Nepali asset is just a logistics point for a product, the trail that's only available for 2 months a year.
So the architecture is wrong, the finances are brittle. The third piece, then, has to be the pivot in marketing. The industry seems fixated on selling a commoditized activity.
Yeah.
Trekking.
And that requires a really profound conceptual shift. If you want to unlock winter revenue, you have to stop selling activity. You have to start selling solitude. You have to sell the experience.
So the silence, the snow, those become the prime features, not the bugs.
Exactly. They can't be downsides you apologize for. They have to be the reason people come.
And that pivot allows them to tap into whole new, higher value customer segments. People who aren't even bothered by the lack of trekking. The source material outlines 3 key ones. Let's go through them.
Okay, so the first is what we can call the creative and academic retreat. This targets knowledge workers, people battling digital distraction, novelists, corporate strategy teams, academics who need deep, uninterrupted focus.
And the value proposition is the Great Himalayan Escape.
That's it, a unique environment for profound, deep work. But that segment requires certain things from the asset.
What would those be?
High comfort, for sure. A specific sense of design, not just beds, but good desks, great views, silence. And critically reliable, redundant internet. Not just basic Wi-Fi, but robust backup systems.
Which adds to the CapEx again.
It does, but it delivers immensely higher margin rates during that quiet off-season. The second segment taps into the multi-trillion-dollar global wellness and mindfulness market.
Right.
The mountain silence, the crisp air, these are powerful, authentic backdrops for high-end yoga, meditation, spiritual retreats. This is a segment that will pay a massive premium for exclusivity and stillness.
They're actively seeking the quiet of winter, not avoiding it.
Precisely. The product is curated stillness. It's expert instruction, specialized cuisine, a total break from modern noise. It's a high-margin business that works perfectly well when the snow is deep.
Okay, and the third?
The third is the domestic and regional luxury traveler. As incomes rise dramatically in neighboring countries like India and Bangladesh, you have this new affluent class looking for safe, comfortable, short-term experiences.
So the focus shifts away from long-haul international trekkers.
Completely. The marketing shifts to selling a winter wonderland getaway. Think gourmet food, roaring fires, maybe some safe snow play for families over a long weekend. But this segment demands the highest standards of comfort and safety, which again proves why that four-season architecture is so essential.
The analysis draws a strong parallel to Bhutan's strategy here, and it's not just about the high tourist fee.
No, it's about their mastery of curation. Bhutan defined a national high-value experience and then built the infrastructure to support it. Nepal, by contrast, has largely been selling fragmented activity-based trips. Winning the winter market means defining and marketing a whole new category that celebrates the off-peak season.
Which means the sector is at a major strategic inflection point. The analysis outlines two very different paths forward, what it calls a great divergence.
That's right. The first path is the painful one, the path of consolidation.
What does that look like?
This is what happens if nothing changes. Operators keep competing fiercely on price for that tiny 2-month window. Their balance sheets stay brittle, and when the next market shock hits, and it always does,
A health crisis, a geopolitical event.
anything, the highly leveraged, inefficient businesses will face insolvency.
Creating a huge acquisition opportunity.
It does. Larger, better capitalized groups, maybe with foreign backing, will acquire those distressed assets for cents on the dollar. It leads to consolidation. It's economically efficient, but it's very painful for the original local entrepreneurs.
But there's a second, more hopeful path. The innovator's path.
This is the optimistic scenario. It relies on a handful of forward-thinking entrepreneurs. They risk significant capital on deep retrofits or even new builds focused entirely on that four-season concept. Insulation, energy efficiency, destination-worthy interiors.
And they bypass the traditional trekking channels.
They do. They market directly to those creative retreat and wellness segments globally. The initial risk is high, of course, but the reward
Is immense.
immense. The first operators who successfully create a compelling, comfortable winter product will essentially capture near monopoly profits for several years. Their success will prove the market exists and force the rest of the industry to adapt.
And the government's role in this isn't to subsidize the old broken model, but to act as a catalyst for this kind of innovation. What specific policies are recommended?
Two key interventions. First, the introduction of a high-altitude hospitality building code. This would mandate minimum energy efficiency standards.
Like what specifically?
It would define required R values, that's the measure of thermal resistance for insulation, and set new standards for heating systems in all new constructions. It would force a transition away from cheap construction toward more efficient systems like those SIPs we talked about.
Which are more expensive upfront, but save a fortune long term.
Exactly. And second, targeted fiscal incentives. Maybe a time-bound tax credit for capital spending on winterization retrofits, installing double-blaze windows, geothermal systems. That would lower the barrier for current owners to take that leap.
So that really is the hard truth we've uncovered here. Most of these existing lodges are liabilities masquerading as assets for 8 months a year. They were built for an obsolete reality.
They were.
And the coming decade is going to see this great divergence between those legacy operators who are just tethered to the autumn peak and the strategic innovators who learn to master the silence of January.
And this really brings us to a final important strategic question for you to think about. Given the immense capital and the very specific technical expertise required for this kind of comprehensive winterization, the knowledge for installing geothermal or using SIPs isn't widespread. And given the assessment that many current smaller owners just lack that capital and vision, is the strategic future of high-altitude ecotourism destined to rely on that consolidation path? Are large, well-capitalized groups, who may or may not be local, are they the only ones truly positioned to unlock all this lucrative off-peak revenue and drive the industry into its four-season future?
A question of capital, design, and destiny. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the economics of solitude. We'll see you next time.